The rain poured down in relentless sheets, cold enough to soak through every layer of clothing. Detective Claire Matthews stood at the threshold of the Thompson apartment, her eyes drawn to the fluttering yellow crime scene tape. Another case, another death, but this one felt different. Lily Thompson's death gnawed at her. Something was missing, something everyone else seemed to overlook. The young woman had been found early in the morning, her body sprawled across the apartment floor. No signs of a struggle, no blood. The apartment was eerily clean, save for the cracked screen of her smartphone resting next to her body. The last clue, a missed call, marked on her phone. An unknown number, untraceable. Claire's instincts told her there was more to this death than anyone was letting on. Inside the sparse apartment, Claire took in the surroundings. Bare walls, minimal furniture, a small kitchenette. It looked like Lily hadn't had time to settle in. Claire crouched beside the phone and gently picked it up, her gloved fingers skimming the cracked screen. As she unlocked it, she saw the last call listed. Missed call. Unknown number. A chill ran down Claire's spine. This wasn't typical. Usually there were clues, concrete leads, something to make sense of it all. But Lily's life didn't add up. Claire had spoken with the landlord, neighbors, and a few of Lily's co-workers. No one had anything useful to say. Everyone described her as friendly and quiet. She'd only moved in a few months ago, and no one seemed to know anything about her life before this apartment. Detective Matthews, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Claire turned to find Officer Carter standing in the doorway, holding a folder in his hands. Carter was relatively new to the force, bright-eyed, eager, but not yet experienced in high-stakes cases. Still, he had the drive, which Claire respected. "Got the autopsy report," he said, walking over and handing it to her. "No signs of trauma. No drugs. Heart failure, they think. But..." Claire opened the folder and scanned the report. Everything pointed to a natural death, but Claire wasn't convinced. The timing didn't match. There were no signs of a break-in. The phone call was odd. A missed call just before she died? That couldn't be a coincidence. "What do we know about the number?" she asked, her attention still on the phone. Carter shook his head. "Nothing. It's a burner phone. We've been trying to trace it, but no luck. Could be anyone." Claire didn't trust it. Whoever made that call knew something important. She was going to find out what. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls and meetings, but they didn't lead anywhere new. Then the tech unit called. They'd traced the phone number to a payphone on the outskirts of town, an old, rusted thing by an abandoned warehouse. Payphones were nearly obsolete now. The location alone felt suspicious. "Let's go check it out," Claire said to Carter, who nodded and climbed into the car. The drive was brief, but it gave Claire time to think. What would Lily be doing out here? The area was desolate, filled with old warehouses that had been long forgotten. It wasn't a place people went unless they wanted to hide. Claire had worked enough cases to know when something felt wrong. This wasn't a random call. It was a trail leading somewhere dark. They arrived at the payphone, its paint peeling, its wires exposed. Claire looked it over, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. Nothing. Just the cold, lonely silence of a forgotten corner of town. She reached for the receiver, but Carter stopped her. "Detective, look," he said, pointing to something half buried in the dirt. Claire squatted down and found a small silver pendant. Simple, but delicate. It didn't have any engraving or unique markings, just a small feminine design. She picked it up, turning it over in her hand. "Could be Lily's," Claire said, standing up. "Let's keep it. Might be important." They searched the area for a while longer but found nothing else. The payphone led nowhere. Back at the station, Claire sat at her desk, the pendant in front of her. She turned it over and over in her hands, her mind racing. There was something about this case that was bothering her. The phone call, the pendant, the strange location. It all felt like part of a bigger story, one that Lily had been too afraid to tell. Claire pulled up Lily's phone records again. This time, she scrolled through the other calls made that night. There were several calls to and from Lily's family and co-workers, but nothing stood out. Until one particular call caught her eye, just before the last missed call. It came from the same unknown number. Wait a minute, Claire muttered to herself. She dug deeper, cross-referencing it with the call logs from the previous month. There was a pattern. This wasn't random. Someone's been watching her, Claire whispered to herself. The calls came every night, always around the same time. Lily had been receiving these calls for weeks, and now it was clear, whoever made those calls knew something about her. The next day, Claire visited Lily's workplace, an upscale art gallery. The manager, Evelyn, seemed genuinely distressed by the news of Lily's death, but Claire noticed she was holding something back. She was quiet, kept to herself, Evelyn said, wiping her hands nervously. She was a talented artist, but we didn't know much about her personal life. Was she involved with anyone? Claire asked, watching Evelyn closely. Any unusual behavior recently? Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. There were rumors. She'd been meeting someone outside of work. She was secretive about it, always on the phone, but she'd never say who it was. I think it made her nervous. Do you know who it was? Evelyn shook her head. I really don't. As Claire drove back to the station, a realization struck her. Lily had been hiding something, and whatever it was had cost her life. The phone calls, the pendant, the secrecy, it was all connected, and it was leading Claire to something dark, something dangerous. Back at the station, Claire pored over Lily's phone records one last time. Then she found it. A call placed earlier that day, just hours before Lily's death, had been made from an office building in the downtown area. The building was familiar. It was where Evelyn worked. Her heart raced. She grabbed her coat and rushed out the door, her mind already racing ahead to what she might find. Something told her this was the key to everything. Evelyn's nervousness, her evasiveness. Claire had missed it before, but now it was clear. Claire arrived at the gallery just as it was closing. The building was almost empty, with a few lights flickering in the windows. She knocked on the back door, her footsteps echoing through the hollow space. Evelyn answered, her face pale, her eyes wide. She hadn't expected Claire to return so soon. Detective? Evelyn said, her voice shaky. What are you doing here? You know why I'm here, Claire replied, stepping inside. I need to ask you a few more questions. Evelyn stepped back, her hand gripping the doorknob. I've already told you everything I know. Then why didn't you mention the calls from your office? Claire asked, her voice sharp. I checked the records. You've been lying to me. Evelyn's face went pale. I didn't want to get anyone in trouble. Claire stepped closer, her gaze never leaving Evelyn. You were involved with Lily in some way. You knew she was in trouble. The calls, the secrecy. You helped her get involved with dangerous people, didn't you? Evelyn crumpled under the weight of Claire's words, tears welling in her eyes. I never meant for this to happen. But it was Victor. He threatened her. He wanted her to do something for him, something illegal, and when she refused, he got angry. He threatened her. And Claire's mind clicked into place. You knew she was in danger. You helped set her up, didn't you? You convinced her to meet him one last time, knowing it was a trap. Evelyn's hands trembled as she broke down. I didn't want her to die. I didn't think it would go this far, but he told me if I didn't help him, he'd ruin everything. I just wanted it to stop. Claire absorbed the confession, her heart heavy. Evelyn had been caught in a web of fear, but that didn't change the fact that her actions had led to Lily's death. The next day, Claire arrested Evelyn for her involvement in Lily's murder. Evelyn didn't resist. She had known the truth all along. Victor, the man behind it all, remained a shadow. No one could find him, and the whispers about him grew darker by the day. Claire knew he was out there, but the case had come to a close. As Claire stood at Lily's grave, the weight of the investigation finally lifted, but the haunting question remained. If someone had stepped in sooner, could Lily have been saved? The last phone call hadn't been a cry for help. It had been a warning, a message that had gone unheard. The phone call had marked the end of one life and the beginning of another story, a story Claire would never forget.